Welcome to today's video. World War II, a global conflict that lasted from 1939 to 1945, reshaped the course of history in ways that are still felt today. But why did this war start? What key events defined it? And what impact did it leave behind? In this video, we'll explore why World War II happened, what took place during the war, and what came afterward. So let's get started. Chapter 1. Why did World War II happen? To understand the origins of World War II, we have to look at the conditions that developed after World War I and the rise of authoritarian leaders. The Treaty of Versailles and German resentment World War I ended in 1918 with the Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919. This treaty placed the blame for the war squarely on Germany, imposing harsh penalties, territorial losses. Germany was forced to give up land, including Alsace-Lorraine, to France, and it lost its overseas colonies. Military restrictions. The German military was drastically reduced, and the country was prohibited from having submarines or an air force. Reparations. Germany was required to pay massive reparations to the Allied powers, which contributed to an economic crisis. This discontent provided fertile ground for the rise of radical political movements, particularly the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler. The rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party. Adolf Hitler rose to prominence by promising to restore Germany's former glory and undo the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler and the Nazis capitalized on the anger and economic hardship in Germany during the 1920s and early 1930s. By 1933, Hitler had become chancellor, and within a few years, he had established a totalitarian regime, suppressing opposition and promoting his vision of a racially pure German empire. Hitler's regime aimed to rebuild Germany's military power, expand its territory in Europe, establish German dominance over what he considered inferior races, especially the Jews. Expansionism and appeasement. Under Hitler's leadership, Germany began rearming and pursuing aggressive expansionist policies, violating the Treaty of Versailles. Key events included the reoccupation of the Rhineland in 1936, the annexation of Austria in 1938 through the Anschluss, the occupation of the Sudetenland, a German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia, later in 1938. European leaders, particularly British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, pursued a policy of appeasement, hoping to avoid another war by allowing Hitler to make these territorial gains. The invasion of Poland and the start of the war. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland using a new form of warfare called blitzkrieg, or lightning war, characterized by rapid, overwhelming attacks. Britain and France, which had pledged to defend Poland, declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. Thus, World War II officially began. Chapter 2. What occurred during the war? Once the war began, it quickly spread beyond Europe, engulfing much of the world in conflict. Let's break down the key events that defined World War II, the early German victories, and the fall of France. In the first few years of the war, Germany experienced rapid success. Using blitzkrieg tactics, Germany invaded and defeated Denmark, Norway, and the Low Countries, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg in quick succession. The most shocking victory came in June 1940, when Germany defeated France in just 6 weeks. France, one of the major Allied powers, was forced to sign an armistice, and northern France, including Paris, came under German occupation. Meanwhile, a puppet government, known as Vichy France, was established in the southern part of the country. The Battle of Britain. With France defeated, Germany turned its attention to Britain. In 1940, the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, launched the Battle of Britain, an aerial campaign aimed at bombing Britain into submission. However, the British Royal Air Force, RAF, successfully defended the country, marking Hitler's first major defeat in the war. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. In June 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, an invasion of the Soviet Union. This was the largest military operation in history, with millions of soldiers involved. Initially, the Germans made significant advances, capturing large portions of Soviet territory. However, as winter set in and Soviet resistance stiffened, the German advance stalled. The turning point came in 1942-43 at the Battle of Stalingrad, where the Soviet Red Army encircled and defeated the German forces. The Pacific Theater, Pearl Harbor, and U.S. entry into the war. While much of the focus was on Europe, war was also raging in the Pacific. In 1937, Japan invaded China, aiming to dominate East Asia. Japan's expansionist ambitions eventually brought it into conflict with the United States. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack killed over 2,400 Americans and damaged or destroyed much of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan, officially entering World War II. Soon after, Germany and Italy declared war on the US, turning the conflict into a truly global war. The turning point, 1942-1943. The years 1942 and 1943 marked a turning point in the war. In the Pacific, the U.S. achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Midway in June 1942, crippling Japan's navy. In North Africa, British forces under General Bernard Montgomery defeated the German Afrika Korps at the Battle of El Alamein in October 1942. In Europe, the Soviet Union's victory at Stalingrad marked the beginning of a massive counteroffensive against German forces. D-Day and the liberation of Europe. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched Operation Overlord, better known as D-Day. This was a massive amphibious invasion of Nazi-occupied France, with Allied troops landing on the beaches of Normandy. Despite heavy resistance, the invasion was successful, and within months, the Allies had liberated Paris and were advancing into Germany. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was advancing from the east, and by early 1945, Germany was being squeezed from both sides. The end of the war in Europe. In April 1945, as Allied and Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. On May 7, 1945, Germany unconditionally surrendered, bringing an end to the war in Europe. This day is commemorated as VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, the end of the war in the Pacific. Although the war in Europe had ended, the conflict in the Pacific continued. To avoid a costly invasion of Japan, U.S. President Harry S. Truman made the decision to use atomic weapons. On August 6, 1945, the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, followed by a second bomb on Nagasaki on August 9. The devastation forced Japan to surrender, and on September 2, 1945, Japan officially capitulated, ending World War II. Chapter 3. What happened afterward? While the fighting stopped in 1945, the effects of World War II shaped the world for decades to come. Let's explore the key outcomes: the United Nations and a new international order. In the aftermath of World War II, the United Nations was established in 1945 with the goal of promoting peace and preventing future conflicts. Unlike the League of Nations, the UN had stronger backing from major world powers, including the United States, the Soviet Union, and China. The Cold War. Despite being allies during the war, tensions quickly arose between the United States and the Soviet Union, leading to the Cold War. This ideological and geopolitical conflict between capitalism and communism lasted for over 4 decades, shaping much of global politics during the second half of the 20th century. Decolonization and independence movements World War II also accelerated the process of decolonization. Many European powers, weakened by the war, were unable to maintain control over their colonies. In the years following the war, countries in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East gained independence, marking the end of European colonial empires. World War II was a defining moment in human history, one that reshaped borders, governments, and societies. As we reflect on the causes, events, and aftermath of this global conflict, it's crucial to remember the lessons it taught us about the importance of peace, diplomacy, and international cooperation. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more historical deep dives. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.